Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video, we'll be looking at Porsche's new gauge cluster and infotainment system. This particular setup is in a Porsche Cayenne. Before we get into this video, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to the Porsche Salt Lake for giving me some time with this Cayenne to be able to do this video. Link to their website in the description down below. Ask for Matt Hendry if you have any questions. Let's get into it. So let's start off by showing the major controls. This little section right here basically is what you're going to be using on the right hand of the steering wheel to do most of the stuff in the center gauge cluster here. But first thing is the drive modes. They will be displayed here in the center gauge cluster. So you just twist the dial on the steering wheel. You can also change the drive modes in the infotainment system. I'll show that a little bit later. But yeah, shows up there. And then if you press this button right here, that will select the gauge cluster itself. And it'll allow you, so if you have it selected here, that'll allow you to change what gauge cluster view you have. So we'll start at the very top, which is the 5 gauge layout. And then down one from that, you've got the 3 gauge layout. And then this one's called 2 gauge, right? And then you have the 2 gauge with the map view. Then you got the full map view, and I'm scrolling down, by the way. And then you have a very simplistic view here. And notice if I continue to scroll down, you can probably hear it a little bit, it doesn't do anything. So it's like a one-way situation there to switch between the different gauge views. Now the next thing is this little button here, so just press that, and this will actually let me scroll through the information within the gauges. Now you have to be on specific gauge views to be able to do this. So for example, if I go back to the center gauge there, so I have that selected, go up, I can only have the center gauge selected with this. Can't have the side gauges. So regardless, depending on the side gauge that you have selected, and it'll be illuminated in blue to let you know that it is selected. I don't know if that's going to pop up on camera very well. We'll determine what information you can show, but they make it very customizable in that sense. And if we go back to the center gauge and then change it again, you can see I can still change these side gauges there. And then we'll go back to the center gauge, change it again. So those gauges will be customizable. And then with this one, it's kind of interesting because basically you either have the map selected or not. So that one's kind of like a big gauge. And then same thing with this one, you either have the center selected or not. So if you want to have more information displayed, you want to have more customization, you got to have the 2 gauges there on either side. Now this Porsche infotainment system, just like most modern infotainment systems, has the camera view within the screen itself. 360 camera with this particular car, really good resolution, by the way. And it does let you click through, so you can go around the car, which is going to make parking quite a bit easier overall. With the infotainment system itself, we've got a shortcut bar there on the side. So for example, if I want to pull up the navigation, and so you can have a nav screen here or in the center gauge cluster, which is nice. Music, you've got your phone, and then the vehicle. The vehicle tab has quite a bit built into it. So for example, I have this driver's seat selected right now, so you can adjust that. But if I press that back, you can adjust the ambient lighting, passenger seat, the comfort entry, which makes it so, let me see if it'll do it automatically. It should. It's supposed to make it so it's easier to get in and out of the car with that, but you can see it says adjust steering wheel and seat. And that's the thing about Porsche is they're very straightforward with all the controls. They let you know exactly what something does, which I really appreciate. Trip computer, you got general assistance, and then you've got the whole drive mode select here, and this is where you can change the drive mode within this screen. And then you can also adjust the chassis suspension and then also the ride height as well. So they give you kind of like a customization that way where you don't have to just change the drive mode and stick with what the drive mode has. Now the next thing with this screen is the main tab here, and that's just the home button. It's quick to respond, and you notice it has some shortcuts right there to different items, and so they kind of double down on a lot of functions. Now this particular one's a plug-in hybrid, so you do have the whole charging setup here that you can add in, so you can plan that all out. But if you just get a traditional ICE car without plug-in hybrid, then it's not going to have that, obviously. But you can also look into the whole climate, and you can adjust a bunch of different functions there, and there's even an eco mode. I've noticed that with a lot of hybrid cars or electric cars is they'll have an eco mode on the climate so that you can maximize your range. And then yes, there is even a sport chrono function as well. I like how there's an evaluate, so you can look at, this is cool. I mean, this is, obviously it's a Porsche, right? So they expect people to do some performance driving, especially if you get like a 911, for example, so you can go into all of that. The parking tab here. So You can see that activate front park view automatically. So I think if I go from reverse to drive, yep. Notice how the camera will automatically turn on with that. I mean, it's a nice thing, if you ask me. But you'll also notice that the response time is very quick. We have Apple CarPlay built in with this as well. And then you can see the devices there. And if you go into the settings tab, this is where you're going to customize all the nitty-gritty stuff. So like the central display, you can change brightness, for example. Same thing with instrument cluster and even the heads-up display. And yes, it's going to be kind of hard to see with the rain here, but we do have a little heads-up display with this as well. And I like additional instrument right there. It's talking about the Sport Chrono clock up top. But yeah, you can adjust that as well. Maybe it's not technically called Sport Chrono with a Cayenne. But yeah, if you want to literally adjust anything right here. Oh yeah, it is a Sport Chrono there. That's what I was thinking. But yeah, if you want to adjust anything, it's all going to be in the settings tab here. And again, everything's very nicely labeled. And so it's pretty straightforward with the use there. And again, that is really the Porsche way. It's just making it so it's very straightforward. Now, the last thing to note about infotainment system stuff is this right here. This is kind of tied into it because you've got the climate stuff here, and it is haptic feedback with the buttons, which I find very interesting. But you've got like a physical volume control and then basically just some physical controls for the climate as well. And it is, I guess, technically a screen, so we can include it. But again, very straightforward, very German. And I didn't get a shot of the drive mode select earlier, so here's that little drive mode select dial that's on the steering wheel. It's just below the center control that you use for everything there. So that's everything for a video going over the center gauge cluster, the infotainment system, these little controls, and then the steering wheel controls. If you guys want me to do more videos like this on other cars, other brands, would be more specific, let me know in the comment section below. And I guess if you want me to do a video in the future, because I think some Porsches, if I remember right, have a little screen there on the passenger side too that you can get, like, I think it was like a Taycan that I reviewed that had one, if I remember right. Let me know if you want to see that as well, and I can definitely do that. But see ya.